What do Moor's wild men and werewolves have in common? And why were they woven into a single tapestry in 1440? You're about to discover how one medieval work of art hides a racial worldview still echoing today. Created around 1440, likely in Strasbourg, this tapestry now hangs in the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. It's more than decoration. It's a symbolic map of race, religion, and fear. At the close of the Middle Ages, Europe was confronting decline and rediscovery. Covered in hair, walking on all fours, and devouring raw flesh, the wild man was Europe's vision of what it meant to fall from God's grace. He wasn't just beastly, he was a warning. This is what happens when civilization collapses. Unlike the noble savage trope of later centuries, the medieval wild man was rarely romanticized. He ate uncooked meat, had no language, and lived outside law and baptism. He symbolized the ever-present fear that sin madness or wilderness could strip a man of his humanity. This creature appears across folklore not just as a myth, but as an allegory, a fallen European rather than a foreign threat. And his bestial qualities, his hunched movement, his growling, his isolation, linked him closely to the terrifying legend of the werewolf. In medieval France and Germany, werewolves weren't just stories, they were prosecuted. The wild man of Wolfenbüttel refers to a figure associated with German folklore and early modern European court culture, particularly from the Duchy of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel, a principality in what is now Lower Saxony, Germany. The wild man wasn't just a myth, he was kin. Petrus Gonsalvus, born in Tenerife in the 16th century, exhibited a rare hereditary condition known today as hypertrichosis. He and his children were welcomed into European courts but never quite seen as equals. Despite their nobility, they were categorized as curiosities, living symbols of Europe's own deep memory. During the colonial and Victorian eras, others like them appeared in both Europe and America. Frau Farini, a Laotian girl, was marketed as the missing link. Jojo, the dog-faced boy, or Fedor Jeftichu from Russia, was exhibited by P.T. Barnum. These were Europeans and colonial subjects cast into a role, the wild man reborn under the guise of science and spectacle. For Europeans, the wild man was not some distant mythological creature. He was a remembered ancestor, a projected image of what one might become, or perhaps once was. The stories, the images, and the fascination with hairy bodies weren't just exoticism. They were a mirror to a time before the civilizing mission, a time when Europe had to reckon with its own reflection. This is why the wild man reappears again and again, not as the other, but as a haunting double, a kinfolk cast out and then consumed by court circuses and curiosity cabinets alike. Paintings of Gonsalvus and his children, also affected, cemented his image as a civilized wild man. One such story, rooted in the lived experience of Petrus Gonsalvus, helped inspire a legend known the world over: Beauty and the Beast. Gonsalvus, educated and married into French nobility, despite his appearance, was a real-life man who embodied the tale's essential message, that beneath the beastly exterior was intellect, nobility, and humanity. His story passed through French aristocratic salons, and court gossip likely gave rise to the earliest literary versions of Beauty and the Beast, where a monstrous man is revealed to be a prince when loved and understood. This was no fairy tale. It was Europe's uneasy reconciliation with its own ancestral body. Not as the other, but as a haunting double. A kinfolk cast out and then consumed by court circuses and curiosity cabinets alike. But Gonsalvus wasn't the only one. During the colonial and Victorian eras, individuals with hypertrichosis were displayed in both Europe and America. In Slavic folklore, particularly in Russia and Eastern Europe, similar figures haunted the imagination. The divnie lyudi, or wondrous people, were secretive forest dwellers, sometimes radiant and wise, other times threatening and unapproachable. They lived beyond civilization, tied to the mystical wilderness. Then there is the chort, a devil-like figure, horned, hairy, unpredictable. Like the Western wild man, the chort represented chaos and moral danger. And further east, among Siberian traditions, accounts of wild men, hairy, speechless, and elusive, appear in indigenous folklore. Sometimes linked to the leshy or to yeti-like creatures, these figures blurred the line between animal and human, much like the Western wild man. They were both feared and revered, living proof of the forest's spiritual power. Across the Christian and animist worlds of the East, the untamed wilderness was not just nature, it was a mirror of moral risk mystery and the ever-present fear of de-evolution. The Bohemian wild man, covered in green leaves and wielding a club, appears in royal seals and flags as early as the 14th century. He stood not as a monster, but as a symbolic guardian, a link to the land, to pre-Christian strength, and to ethnic memory. To Czech nobility, this leafy figure was both protector and ancestor, part of the kingdom's visual language. Unlike the feared wild man of the West, the Bohemian wild man was adopted and honored, a reclaimed piece of pagan past that had been woven into national identity. It was not just nature, it was a mirror of moral risk mystery and the ever-present fear of de-evolution. In Slavic folklore, particularly in Russia and Eastern Europe, similar figures haunted the imagination. But opposite the wild men were the Moors, refined, powerful, and independent. Wild men were accused of the ultimate taboo, eating human flesh. Historically, so-called civilized Europeans actually practiced ritual cannibalism. From the 12th to the 18th centuries, European doctors prescribed mumia, powdered Egyptian mummies, as medicine. Ground human remains, often taken from Muslim or African graves, were sold in apothecaries across Europe. Even royalty partook. King Francis I of France reportedly carried mummy powder with him to heal bruises. Clergy, physicians, and nobles saw this corpse consumption not as savage, but as scientific. As historian Richard Sugg put it, the real cannibals were not the imagined savages, but those who believed themselves most civilized. This grim irony reveals a deeper truth. In Europe's moral imaginations, savagery wasn't about the act itself, it was about who performed it. When outsiders did it, it was monstrous. When Europeans did it, it was medicine. In the Alexander romance, the conqueror battles tribes of dog-headed people and cannibals. The wild man stood for internal collapse, the threat of degeneration from within. The Moor, by contrast, represented the refined outsider, wealthy, powerful, non-Christian, a rival to be feared. The wild men in Moor's tapestry isn't just medieval decor, it's a worldview woven in silk and fear. If you enjoyed this video, type #whitewash in the chat. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe.